The proof that his great-grandfather ordered the burning of the libraries, the execution of the scholars, the systematic destruction of the very knowledge he now hoards. You watch his eyes scan the damning words. You can hear his breathing, a wet, ragged sound in the quiet room. He looks up, his face a mask of crumbling pride. Lies, he hisses, but the word has no conviction. Are they, you ask? Your voice, calm. The mob outside believes in omens. They will tear you to pieces and call it God's will. Your finger traces a line of ink. A fortune in gold florins, designated for a new aqueduct to combat the city's constant plague of dysentery, is scratched out. A new entry is scrawled beside it. The funds diverted to the acquisition of the holy prepuce. They traded the lives of thousands for a grotesque relic and the power of the story it told. But the final document is the one that stops your heart. It's a private bull, a secret charter for the eyes of inquisitors only, and it redefines heresy itself. The abbess of the Sisterhood of the Quill is a woman carved from oak and shadow, her face a roadmap of secrets kept. Her eyes, ancient and sharp, assess you not as a tool of the bishop, but as a mind, a potential piece in a game you don't even know you're playing. Your master believes you are clever, she says, her voice a low rustle, like vellum turning in a silent library. He sends you to sever a smuggling route, a minor artery of commerce that offends his treasury. A child's errand. You say nothing. They are not the eyes of a criminal, but of a man watching the world he built with his own hands burn to the ground. He is in the right. You know it. He knows it. And the bishop, whose nephew Lothar claims this man's land, knows it too. It doesn't matter. You see the combat that is to come, played out in your mind. Lothar, sleek and arrogant in his family's polished mail, trained with the sword since he could walk. Elias, with his work-swollen hands and a wood axe that has seen more trees than flesh. And you know, with the cold certainty of a winter frost, that to follow him into that darkness is a step from which you can never return. You remember the day they dragged her from her cottage, her jars of healing salves and dried herbs smashed on the dirt floor. They called her a witch. But now, sitting in this opulent room, you finally understand. Her real crime was not sorcery. It was competence. Your fingers, trembling, trace the spines of scrolls and the bindings of codices that shouldn't exist. You unroll a brittle scroll. It's not scripture. It's a diagram, impossibly detailed, of a Roman aqueduct, with calculations for gradients and flow that no one alive is supposed to understand. Another book falls open to a chapter by Columella on three-field crop rotation, a technique that could end the famines that scar your world every third winter. Then you see it, a text by Vitruvius, and your blood runs cold. The final fuse is you. You walk into the bishop's private scriptorium unopposed. The guards are gone. Having fled the palace they now see as cursed. The room smells of old parchment and the bishop's sour sweat. He sits behind a massive oak desk, his face the color of old tallow. You don't speak of the revolt, or the cathedral, or the prophecy. You simply unroll the scholar's prize, the meticulously documented genealogy, the copied letters, the damning proof of his own lineage's direct role in the Great Suppression. Here, a letter, the papal seal still miraculously intact, its brittle red wax cracking with a sound like ancient bones. It doesn't request, it commands a bishop in the north to cleanse by fire a monastery's library, to burn the Greek philosophies and the Arabic medicine before their godless reason poisons the flock. It's not a suggestion. It's a death sentence for 1,000 years of human thought. Beside it, a set of financial accounts, the script precise and chillingly mundane. There are two types of power in this world, the kind that is shouted from pulpits and the kind that is whispered in cellars. You are about to learn which one truly matters. The door to the abbess's study closes behind you with a soft, oiled click, a sound too gentle for the weight of finality it carries. The air is thick, almost sweet, with the scent of melting beeswax, dried lavender, and something else. The dry, dusty perfume of knowledge that has outlived its authors. She does not rise. 99% of people believe trial by combat is God's judgment. The forbidden truth is that it is a carefully staged ritual of murder, where the verdict is bought and paid for in steel and coin, long before the first blow is ever struck. The farmer, Elias, stands before you, his knuckles white where he grips the edge of your oak table. The room smells of damp stone and his fear, a sour animal scent that clings to the torchlight. His eyes, that's the part that damns you. You are learning how the powerless communicate right under the noses of their masters. A skill more valuable than any sword, a secret that can build a cathedral or burn an empire. He gives you a final, piercing look. He gestures with his head, a slight, almost imperceptible nod toward the rising, skeletal walls of the cathedral, to a darkened archway where the shadows are deepest. He turns and begins to walk, expecting you to follow. He is not just showing you their secrets anymore. He is inviting you into the conspiracy. It was a business model, funding the institution by crushing its competition. The bishop stops speaking. He smiles, a thin, dry crack in his placid face, and pushes a silver goblet of wine across the polished table toward you. The smooth, liquid hiss of the wine against the metal sounds like a serpent. As you look at his offering, his face dissolves. For a fleeting, horrifying moment, you see the face of Elspeth, the midwife from your childhood. You remember her warm, flour-dusted hands and the scent of rosemary that always clung to her clothes. It smells of forgotten time, a sweet, cloying scent of decaying paper and dry leather, a perfume of imprisoned knowledge. You thrust the lamp inside. It's not a vault, it's a library, a tomb for ideas. Here, hidden behind a false wall in a wine cellar, is what 99% of people will never know. It's the secret they refuse to discuss in the universities, the truth that crumbles the very foundation of this so-called age of faith. These aren't just the heretical gospels you expected. In the back alleys where black market goods move like rats in the walls, your agents don't hand out swords for a suicidal charge. They distribute crossbows, barrels of quarrels, casks of oil, not for an attack, but for a siege. The peasant leaders, their eyes burning with a new, terrifyingly cold fire, understand the shift in strategy. They don't storm the bishop's palace. They surround it. They control the wells. They control the roads. For the first time in their lives, they are not a mob. They are an army with a singular purpose: to wait. The wars you read about in the history books were a distraction. The real war wasn't fought with swords and siege engines over patches of muddy earth. It was a silent, centuries-long slaughter of ideas, and you are holding the evidence. The vellum is cold as a corpse's skin under your trembling fingers. The scent of dry rot and forgotten ink, a perfume of intellectual decay, fills your lungs as the candle flame dances, casting your shadow like a giant, hunched conspirator against the stone. The lie falls away, piece by agonizing piece. You've learned how to command the gods, but as the bishop's procession carries his paralyzed, twitching nephew away, his eyes sweep the crowd and find yours. There is no fear in them. There is only the cold, silent recognition of an apex predator spotting another. The farmer is safe, but you have just made an enemy who understands the true language of power, and he knows you can speak it, too. You have found a new potential ally, one whose mind was forged in the same fire as the women in these books. But seeking her out means stepping out of the shadows and into the history they tried to burn. He reaches out, and with a single calloused finger, traces a hidden line within the carved ivy. Your breath catches. The leaves and stems are merely decoration, camouflage. The true shape, the one his finger reveals, is the constellation Draco, the dragon, a star map from pre-Christian sky charts, a symbol of ancient power the church has spent centuries trying to erase. He is teaching you to see the world in their language, to read the book they have hidden in God's own house. It's the same tactic you see whispered about in the royal courts and the merchant guilds today. Label an idea you fear a heresy or a madness to discredit it without ever having to face the evidence. It's a way to make the truth itself sound insane. A suppressed 12th century manuscript you once saw, its ink faded, but its message searing, revealed the final, damning piece of the puzzle. Church inquisitors, it stated, were given bonuses, a percentage of the value of all property seized from a convicted witch. It was never about saving souls. A crack in the mortar, thin as a spider's thread that doesn't follow the pattern. You press your fingers against the stone. It's cold, unyielding. You push harder, your shoulder digging into the rock, the rough surface scraping your skin through your woolen tunic. For a moment, nothing. Then, a low groan, the sound of stone surrendering to pressure. The wet scrape of your fingernail against the crumbling mortar is the only sound as the block pivots inward, revealing a cavity of absolute blackness. The air that spills out is a ghost. It doesn't smell of wine or earth. 2 nights later, as the moon hangs like a sliver of bone, a sound like a giant's groan echoes through the city. Not a crash, but a deep, grinding shudder. The new wing of the bishop's vanity project sags, a cascade of stone and timber falling inward with a deafening roar that leaves a cloud of white dust hanging in the air like a ghost. No one is hurt, but the prophecy is fulfilled. The sky has wept stone. The crowd that gathers at dawn doesn't see a structural failure. They see an omen. The third fuse is steel. And the scholar has just handed you the proof that could either relight the world or become your funeral pyre. What people don't understand is that facts are irrelevant. The only thing that matters is the story they believe. The farmer keeps his land. The bishop, his face a perfect mask of pious awe, publicly praises the miracle of God's intervention, all while quietly sending envoys to negotiate for the holy ground. He is trapped by your more compelling, more profitable narrative. You stand in the shadows of the crowd, the author of this divine play, and you feel the very floor of the world shift beneath your feet. You haven't just won a battle with a sword. The torch gutters, casting your shadow long and monstrous against the wall. The manuscript in your hands is no longer just a relic. It's evidence. It's a map. and it points to a woman who may be the last living link to a conspiracy of knowledge the world has spent centuries trying to forget. Suddenly, the stale air of the vault feels charged, electric with consequence. You are no longer a scavenger of the past. You are a keeper of a secret that is still alive and still incredibly dangerous. For a long moment, the sounds of the camp fade away. There is only the symbol in the dust between you, a bridge between two forbidden worlds. With a slow, deliberate movement, he scuffs it out with his own worn leather boot, erasing the heresy from the earth. He stands, his joints cracking like dry twigs. He looks not at you, but at a half-carved stone depicting a cluster of ivy leaves. "The vine climbs toward the light," he says, his voice a low rumble, like stones grinding together. But its roots hold the dark. The metallic taste of bile rises in your throat. It's a flavor you've come to associate with a certain kind of truth, the kind that rearranges the world. This was never about theology. It was a purge, a brutal, systematic extermination of decentralized, female-held knowledge. It was a consolidation of power. What they don't want you to know is that the charges were designed to be absurd. Flying on broomsticks, cavorting with Satan, cursing the neighbor's cow. These ridiculous fictions were a smokescreen to mask the real crime, being a trusted, non-clerical authority. The scent of God is replaced by the smell of the earth, damp stone, souring wine, and the deep, fungal breath of the cellar. Casks of Malmsey and claret stand like silent, sleeping giants in the flickering light of your tallow lamp. Each one is stamped with the cross of the Benedictine order, guardians of knowledge, keepers of the faith. But the symbols don't point to the wine. They lead you to a wall of rough-hewn stone, a section that looks no different from the rest. But you see it. Within a day, the whisper has become a murmur. Within a week, a fever. The second fuse is stone. You meet the master of the Masons' Guild, not in his office, but in the half-finished cathedral wing. The air thick with the scent of wet mortar and cut limestone. He owes your network his life. You don't ask him to destroy. You ask him to reveal a flaw. A single, critical support stone that was improperly set. He understands. The families and clerical orders who orchestrated it all. As his finger slides down the vellum, your breath catches in your throat. You see it. A name you know. A lineage you have sworn loyalty to. The bishop's family. The wax from the candle drips onto the stone floor. A soft, wet sound, like a tear. The secret is no longer a grand historical theory. It is here, in this cellar, in your hands. It has a name you know, and a face you fear. This isn't just a conspiracy. It's your life. Heard the water there cured my cousin's room. They say it was blessed by a saint in the old times. The merchant's eyes go wide. A holy spring, on that very land. The narrative has been rewritten. The nephew is not a warrior. He is a sinner struck down. The farmer is not a victim. He is a righteous man protected by God. And his land is no longer a prize to be won by force, but a holy site to be acquired through piety. It's a medieval public relations campaign. A psyop executed with herbs and rumors. The ink is faded, the code subtle. It refers to a sisterhood of the quill, and below it, a list of names. Not saints, not queens, just names. Agnes, Hildegard, Marguerite. And then one that makes the blood freeze in your veins. It's the name of the abbess of the convent on the hill overlooking this very town. A woman known throughout the region for her unwavering piety, her quiet charity, and, if you listen to the hushed whispers in the marketplace, for a defiance that glints in her eyes like sharpened steel. You hold no weapon, you offer no threat. You simply walk to a patch of dusty ground near where he sits, and with the toe of your boot, you draw a shape in the dirt. It's a diagram from the Heretic's Codex, a geometric proof demonstrating the golden ratio, the divine proportion the Church denounces as pagan mysticism. You don't say a word. You just draw the spiraling nautilus within the nested rectangles. Alara's chewing stops. His eyes, the color of slate, flick from the diagram to your face. There is no surprise, only a deep, weary, and dangerous understanding. They were the village midwives, whose hands, chapped and knowing, brought new life into the world with a success rate that shamed the church-sanctioned physicians with their leeches and prayers. They were brewers who understood the alchemy of fermentation, botanists who knew which roots could break a fever and which leaves could soothe a wound. Their authority wasn't granted by a distant pope. It was earned, person by person, in the heart of the community, and that made them a direct threat to the priest whose power relied on being the sole conduit to God and salvation. The greatest lie of this age isn't about God. It's about what was lost in the fires of Rome. The truth is, nothing was lost. It was stolen. The codex in your hands is heavy, not just with vellum and ink, but with the weight of that theft. You follow the symbols in its margins, a secret language of stars and water signs that the monks who copied it never understood. They lead you away from the scriptorium's hallowed silence, past the incense-choked chapel, down, always down, into the gut of the monastery. Down here, the air changes. They don't forge a relic this time. They forge a prophecy. On a scrap of vellum aged in urine and smoke, written in a crabbed hand that perfectly mimics a mad hermit from 2 centuries prior, they write of a ruler who spills the blood of his own flock on holy ground. The prophecy speaks of the sky weeping stone and the very house of God cracking in judgment. This document, smelling of grave dust and divine wrath, is slipped into the binding of a prayer book delivered to the most superstitious, gossip-prone priest in the city. They aren't separate lies. They are all pillars holding up one monstrous, cathedral-sized deception. This is a pattern that never truly dies, does it? Creating a fear where none existed, then positioning yourself as the sole savior. Tariq sees the understanding dawning on your face. He slowly, deliberately, pulls out a second scroll, this one sealed with dark wax. He breaks the seal. "I have the final piece," he whispers, copied from records preserved in Byzantium. Not just the edicts ordering the burnings, but the names. He unrolls it. It is a list, a genealogy of power. His left leg buckles. He falls to his knees, his mouth opening in a silent scream, a line of spittle tracing a path through the grime on his chin. His body convulses, a grotesque pantomime of a man being torn apart by an invisible force. A gasp ripples through the crowd, a single horrified intake of breath. Someone screams, "God's judgment!" The phrase catches like wildfire. This is no longer a duel, it's a miracle. At that exact moment, you hear it from the edge of the crowd, a mason talking loudly to a merchant. It's the historical version of an online platform rewriting its terms of service to legally justify deplatforming influential voices that challenge the official narrative. It was a calculated, theological character assassination on an industrial scale, designed to erase these women not just from the present, but from history itself. You carefully lift one of the smaller volumes. The paper is impossibly fine. As you turn a page, you hear the faint, crisp crackle of the ancient vellum, a whispery sound that hasn't been heard in 500 years. Tucked into the binding, you find a small, folded note. His face is a roadmap of sun and hardship, his hands gnarled like the roots of an ancient oak, yet they move with a surgeon's grace. He is a master, and he is the keeper of their secrets. You've seen other guards try to question his men, only to be met with a wall of silent, contemptuous obedience. You cannot command this knowledge from him. You must bargain for it. You wait until the midday bell calls the men to their meager lunch of dark bread and weak ale. You approach Ilara not as a captain, but as something else. His eyes, however, betray a cruelty that the perfumed robes and sanctimonious words cannot hide. But the codex you studied in secret, its pages brittle as autumn leaves, tells a different story. It whispers a truth that 99% of people will never learn, a truth that could get you burned. The so-called witches weren't devil worshippers. They were the keepers of knowledge that had been passed down from mother to daughter for 1,000 years. And as you stare at the faint green stain on your bandage, a question burns brighter than the rising sun. Who else knows about this mold? And why was this truth worth killing for? They expect you to choose a side, the boot or the pitchfork, the tyrant or the mob. What 99% of people will never understand is that true power doesn't choose a side. It rewrites the rules of the war itself. You do not crush the revolt. You do not join it. You simply light the fuses of a plan that has been sleeping in the dark for generations. The first fuse is a whisper. It starts with the relic forgers, men whose hands are so skilled they could create the finger bone of a saint from pig knuckle and prayer. What they don't want you to know is that they did not simply find a cure for humanity's suffering, he says, his voice trembling with a fury centuries in the making. They engineered the disease so they could sell the only cure they controlled: obedience. This wasn't a dark age. It was an age of induced amnesia, a controlled demolition of the human mind. Your own mind reels, scrambling for purchase, the medical fraud that lets limbs fester, the historical forgeries that justify a king's rule, the economic slavery that keeps you bound to the land. For a fraction of a second, the oily paste on your skin, hidden beneath a leather finger guard, meets his. He shoves you away with a curse, feeling nothing. But you felt it, the transfer. The poison has been planted. The story has begun. The duel starts. Steel rings on wood. The nephew is toying with the farmer, a cat with a dying mouse. He raises his sword for the final, theatrical blow, and then it happens. His arm freezes mid-air. A look of profound confusion crosses his face. His sword, suddenly too heavy, clatters into the mud. They were the Beguines, the mystics, the writers who corresponded in secret, smuggling books and ideas past the watchful eyes of their male confessors. They used the language of divine revelation to mask a sophisticated takedown of patriarchal and clerical power. You feel a chill that has nothing to do with the cold stone. This network was so influential, so threatening to the established order, that the church had to invent new sins to destroy it. They created specific, damning doctrines about the inherent inferiority of the female mind, the weakness of the female soul. Archaeologists, centuries from now, will analyze the stones of Chartres and find geometric ratios, alignments to solstices, and astronomical calculations that official history claims were lost to Christian Europe. They were not lost. They were hidden. They were being carved into the faces of gargoyles and woven into the tracery of rose windows. It's like finding a secret, critical source code hidden within a state-controlled piece of software, a truth encoded for those who know how to look. You focus on one man, Alara. The bishop's hands are soft, unblemished. They have never known a callus, a splinter, or the sting of lye soap. He gestures as he speaks, and a heavy gold ring glints in the candlelight, catching the deep crimson of the wine in his goblet. His chambers are a cocoon of warmth against the damp chill of the stone monastery. Thick tapestries swallowing sound, the air heavy with the cloying scent of frankincense and rosewater. He speaks of witches, of souls stained black by congress with the devil, and his voice is a polished river stone, smooth, pious, and utterly cold. But when the gray morning light filters through the trees, something is wrong. The fire in your leg has cooled to a dull ache. The world is no longer swimming at the edges. You touch your forehead. The skin is cool, damp with clean sweat. The fever has broken. The angry purple swelling has receded, leaving behind only the wound itself. You didn't just save your leg, you saved yourself from them. You proved their sacred doctrine is a lethal fraud. Built on a foundation of buried knowledge, a new, colder fear settles in. This secret works. Your life is forfeit either way. The only question is what you die for, the bishop's lie or their truth. Captain, your lieutenant presses, his hand on the hilt of his sword. Your orders? Why pray to a priest for rain when you can repair your own aqueduct? Why pay for a holy relic to cure your child's fever when you know that willow bark tea will break it by morning? Why fear the demons a bishop invents when you can read the philosophy of the Greeks and learn to master your own mind? The world tilts. Every sermon you have ever heard, every prayer you have ever uttered, suddenly feels like a link in a chain. The farmer, Thomas, stands opposite, his face the color of ash, holding a wood axe that looks like a child's toy. The crowd buzzes, hungry for a righteous kill. They want a simple story, the strong vanquishing the weak. You are about to give them a much better one. As the nephew passes, you stumble, a clumsy foot soldier jostling the gentry. Your hand flies out to steady yourself against his shoulder, your thumb pressing firmly into the hollow above his collarbone. They were meant to be silent vessels for childbirth and piety. What they don't want you to know is that this was a carefully constructed lie, a prison of perception built to contain a terrifying truth. Women were thinking, deeply, critically, and together. Your fingers, trembling slightly, trace the lines of a political critique that is sharper than any sword. This wasn't a cottage industry of lonely thinkers. This was a network, a thriving, underground intellectual movement that stretched from the drafty halls of noble women's castles to the cloistered silence of convents. A young apprentice makes a mistake, and the master mason taps his own elbow twice, a silent rebuke more damning than any curse. They have a language without tongues, the scripture without pages, and it is happening right under the watchful eye of the bishop. This is what they don't want you to know. The very men building the church's greatest monuments were embedding them with knowledge that would see a lesser man burned at the stake. The ink is dark, the loops of the name arrogant and precise. It is the signature of a man certain of his own righteousness. It is the name of the bishop you are scheduled to meet at sunrise. What they don't want you to know is that this book and others like it contain the lost keys to a world without plague, the secret of antibiotics, a branch of knowledge so powerful it was ruthlessly pruned from history and branded as witchcraft. The metallic taste of fear coats your tongue as you scrape the fuzz from the bread and press it into your wound. But the fear of the church's lie is suddenly, shockingly, greater than your fear of death. You drift into a shallow, pain-racked sleep, expecting to wake to the barber's saw, or not at all. The silence that follows is heavier than any scream. Watts steps forward alone into the torchlight and unrolls the scroll. He looks up, directly at you. He knows who you are. The network told him. He is about to speak, to read the demands that history will erase. Your choice is impossibly simple and eternally complex. Give the order, and you become the butcher who crushes the only spark of hope these people have ever known, a willing tool of a corrupt system. Refuse, and you become a traitor, the man who let the flame of rebellion catch. This knowledge was not lost, Tariq says, his finger tracing a complex archway. It was targeted, it was hunted, it was declared demonic. The early fathers of your church did not stumble through the ruins of Rome in ignorance. They walked through its libraries with torches. They saw Roman hygiene, medicine, philosophy, and they understood a terrifying truth. His eyes find yours, and you feel a cold dread seep into your bones, colder than the cellar stone. A population that is healthy, educated, and self-sufficient is a population that is difficult to rule. You trace the symbol, a compass with a broken leg, into his palm. His eyes flicker once. You whisper 5 words, the spring on Old Man Hemlock's land. You don't say it's holy. You don't have to. You have just lit a fuse. The bread feels warm in your hands, but the exchange is colder than a winter grave. By noon, the stage is set. The dueling ground is a theater of mud and anticipation. The bishop's nephew struts like a peacock, his sword a flash of arrogant light. These manuscripts are illuminated with a delicate, defiant beauty. Vines of silver leaf and crushed lapis coiling around letters written in an elegant, flowing script. But the words they form are not prayers. They are poems about the nature of the soul, philosophical treatises on justice, biting, brilliant political theories that dismantle the divine right of kings and priests with devastating logic. And they were all written by women. This is the secret 99% of people will never learn. You were taught that medieval women were chattel, powerless, uneducated property who passed from father to husband. You are watching the men, the Masons. They move like a separate species. They are an itinerant guild, a river of knowledge flowing through a parched and ignorant land, belonging to no lord and no parish. They pledge allegiance only to their craft and to each other. You see it in the way they communicate. A foreman doesn't shout. He raises 2 fingers to his temple, and a block of limestone weighing more than a horse is hoisted into the sky. You are the keeper of a secret the most powerful organization in the world has already killed to protect. You feel the chilling weight of the monk's final entry, not just his words, but the story they tell. 3 of us knew the truth. They didn't just record data, they recorded their own death sentences. You scroll to the very bottom of the page, past the numbers and the desperate pleas for reason. There, below a list of the burned, is the official seal and signature on the execution order for Brother Thomas and the healer Annabelle. But the book demands one more act of heresy. It describes a specific type of mold, a greenish-blue fuzz growing on a heel of stale bread you've kept hidden. The church has a name for this: devil's rot, a physical manifestation of sin and decay. But the Codex, in its elegant, forbidden script, calls it a source of healing. You see the communication systems, runners moving between the flanks. You see the clear political goal held aloft like a standard. You understand, in a moment of cold, terrifying clarity, that this isn't a riot. It's a revolution, and they are frighteningly close to succeeding. Your lieutenant, a young nobleman's son with more ambition than sense, turns to you. "The archers are ready, Captain. Give the word." The men on the wall are tense, their bowstrings humming with a low, deadly vibration. Below, the sea of torches stops just outside of arrow range. The chanting ceases. He pauses, and the weight of his next words seems to suck the very air from the room. It was a strategy. From a leather satchel, he pulls a scroll. The parchment is new, but the diagrams are ancient, copied with a perfect, steady hand. He unrolls it on the damp stone between you. The sound is a soft, papery hiss in the suffocating silence. You see designs for aqueducts that could bring clean water to a whole city, schematics for underfloor heating, medical drawings of surgical tools that could save a woman in childbirth. It's the ability to make your enemy dance on strings he cannot see for a crowd that doesn't even know there is a show. Hours before dawn, you find your second weapon. Not in a book, but in the rough, calloused hand of a stonemason. You don't speak of your plan. You don't have to. The Masons have a language older than the kingdom, carved in stone and passed in silence. You buy a loaf of bread from his wife, and as he hands it to you, your fingers brush his. But you push past the familiar works of dissent, the texts of men who dared to question God. You're looking for something else, something they were even more afraid of. And then you see it. Tucked away, almost hidden behind a stack of papal bulls, is a wooden chest, its iron bands rusted into silence. The lock crumbles under the persuasion of your dagger. The lid groans open, and the scent that rises is not of mold, but of dried lavender and expensive vellum. Inside, bathed in the trembling gold of your torch, are not the scriptures you expected. 99% of people look at a cathedral and see a monument to God. They have no idea they're really looking at the most sophisticated act of rebellion ever carved in stone. From your position overseeing the new wing, the construction site is a chaos of divine ambition and human sweat. The air is thick with the sweet smell of wet lime mortar and the iron tang of men working too hard. You hear the rhythmic, almost hypnotic chink-chink scrape of 100 mallets and trowels, a prayer offered in labor. But you are not watching the spectacle. It's a chillingly familiar story, a ghost that whispers through the ages. You've seen it in your own time. A panic is manufactured, fear is stoked until it's a wildfire, and then a single, institutionally approved solution is offered. Any talk of alternatives, any mention of older wisdom or different paths is censored, branded as dangerous, and its proponents are silenced. The methods change, from the pyre to the printing press to the platforms you can't yet imagine. But the motive remains the same: control. The metallic taste of fear floods your mouth. The cool night air is a mercy on your burning skin. You follow a diagram in the codex, its lines etched into your memory, a map to a forbidden hope. There, by the riverbank, shimmering faintly in the moonlight, is a common weed, yarrow. The book calls it herba militaris, the soldier's herb. Your fingers, clumsy with fever, mash the leaves into the cold, silty river mud. You bind the poultice to your wound with a strip of torn linen, your teeth biting through your lip to swallow the scream as the searing paste touches the raw, open flesh. A low, rhythmic sound begins to carry on the wind. It's not the roar of a mob. It's a chant, a song. It's organized. As they draw closer, you see it. They move in formations, men with scythes and axes flanking those with hunting bows. Watt is at their head, not in rags, but in a boiled leather jack you recognize from the wars. He carries no weapon, only a rolled scroll. The official record, the one that will survive for centuries, will say they were a disorganized horde. But you see the lie with your own eyes. Barbarians burned the libraries. Knowledge was lost, and the church, in its mercy, gathered the last flickering embers of civilization to preserve them through a long, dark night. A sound escapes Tariq's throat, not a laugh, but something far more bitter. The dry crackle of a dead leaf underfoot. That is the story they allow you to know, he whispers, leaning closer. The candlelight catches the sweat on his brow. 99% of people believe civilization simply collapsed after Rome. An accident of history, a tragedy. But it wasn't a tragedy. Applied to the skin over the brachial plexus just beneath the collarbone, it doesn't kill. It mimics the wrath of God. Your knuckles are white as you grip the stone mortar. The pestle makes a dry, whispering sound against the brittle leaves, a sound like bones grinding to dust. This is the real alchemy. Not turning lead to gold, but turning a brutish noble into a divine cautionary tale. 99% of people believe power is something you seize, a castle you take, a man you kill. What they will never know is that true power is the art of the puppeteer. They burned women for knowing things men didn't understand. But what you're about to find proves the greatest heresy wasn't witchcraft, it was a library card. The air in the bishop's vault is a physical weight, thick with the ghosts of confiscated thoughts and the damp, earthy smell of secrets. Your torchlight flickers, a nervous heartbeat against stone that has forgotten the sun. It illuminates shelves of condemned items, the tools of heretics and free thinkers. Astronomical charts, alchemical tools, and books. So many books, bound in cracked leather and shame. He smiles back, a gesture of pure satisfaction, believing he has just bought another loyal sword. He has no idea he has just handed a key to the man who plans to burn his entire world to the ground. 5% survival rate was a miracle of medicine, not God. And the church could not, would not, tolerate a miracle it did not author. Suddenly, you understand the true nature of the secret. It was never about saving souls. It was about controlling them. This scroll proves that common people, armed with forbidden knowledge, had power over their own survival. A power that didn't require a priest's blessing, a bishop's prayer, or a single coin in the collection plate. This threatens the very foundation of an authority built on the terror of divine retribution. It is ritualized butchery, a brutal spectacle to reinforce the one truth they must control. Your life is a gift from God, and only His chosen servants have the right to take it away. Your skin crawls, not from the fever, but from the chilling echo of His philosophy, the same institutional arrogance that centuries from now will dismiss any truth that threatens its power, protecting the established and profitable lie. That night, you choose a different faith. You drag yourself out of the suffocating tent, one agonizing inch at a time, a mud sucking at your elbows. The final words on the page are not an answer, but a question that bleeds through the centuries, staining the very air you breathe. They lied about the past. What else are they lying about now? They speak of a kingdom of heaven on earth, a world with no bishops in velvet and no lords in castles, a world where the tiller of the soil is a master of his own soul. What the chronicles will never, ever mention is that they have a manifesto, a list of demands so reasonable, so profoundly just, it is the most heretical document you have ever known. They don't just want the tax repealed, they want an end to serfdom. They want fair wages. They want the right to speak to God without a priest as a tollkeeper. It sputters, casting his face in a hellish dance of shadow and flame, and the air is thick with the smell of wet earth and ancient decaying paper. He watches you for a long moment, his eyes dark and impossibly old. "Tell me," he says, his voice a low rasp, "what do you know of the age before this one?" You tell him what every child is taught. Rome grew proud and fell. The world collapsed into chaos. The deadliest weapon in the 13th century isn't a sword, it's a whisper. You understand this now, hunched over the forbidden codex, the candlelight turning the ink on the vellum into a blood-dark language. The pages smell of dust and heresy, and the script seems to writhe, revealing secrets of the body the church would have you burned for knowing. Here, in the chapter on nerve vipers and devil's palsy, you find it. A recipe not for death, but for the performance of death. Wolfsbane, henbane, and the distilled oil from a certain nightshade root. It's a pig's knuckle. The deception is so blatant, so utterly contemptuous of the faith of thousands, it steals the air from your lungs. The lie feels heavy in your hand, heavier than any stone, and you realize, with a cold dread that sinks to the bottom of your soul, that the most dangerous secrets aren't the ones the church hides from you, but the ones it dares you to find. You have to get close enough to see the ledgers. You need to understand the flow of coin and fear. You need to be inside the machine to learn which gears to break. You reach out, your rough fingers brushing against the smooth, crisp vellum. You look up and meet the bishop's gaze, forcing a smile that feels like a mask of cracking clay. "I accept," you say, your voice a betrayal of the vow you just made to yourself. "I am honored to serve." The village of Oakhaven, 200 souls given the mark. Beside it, a second column. Souls lost to the Lord, 3. Your breath catches. 3. You scan down the page to the next entry, written with a heavier, angrier stroke. The village of piety, neighboring Oakhaven, refused the mark. Offered only prayer. You feel a cold dread creep up your spine as you read the number. Of the 150 souls in that village, 90 were dead within a month, a 60% death rate. The monk's math is simple, brutal, and undeniable. A 98. The camp surgeon kneels beside you, his shadow a drunken ghoul dancing in the firelight. He's a barber, and the only instrument he trusts is a rust-flecked saw that has tasted more bone than it has wood. He quotes scripture about the weakness of the flesh, his breath a sour fog of cheap wine and absolute certainty. You can hear the wet scrape of the saw against its leather sheath, a sound that promises an end to pain and an end to you. 99% of people don't know that this isn't medicine. It's a sermon delivered in blood and bone. A prison with no walls, where the inmates willingly forge their own chains, believing it to be freedom. You stare at the ancient text, at the spidery script, and you realize it's not a window, it's a mirror. The cold dread you feel isn't a memory of their past, it's the chilling recognition of your present. They lied about the soldier who became an emperor, recasting him as a footnote. They lied about the past, sanitizing it into a story of banners and crowns to hide the silent, brutal war against human thought itself. The network's message, a slip of smuggled parchment you burned to ash moments after reading it, told you the forbidden truth. The leader isn't some wild-eyed farmer. He's a man named Watt, a former soldier who fought in the French campaigns. He knows tactics, he knows discipline, and he's not alone. With him are followers of a hedge preacher, a man who whispers of a radical Christ, one who broke bread with the poor and drove the moneylenders from the temple. The greatest lie ever told wasn't written in a book. It was carved out of the world, leaving a hole where knowledge used to be. The man from Cordoba, the scholar you are sworn to protect, huddles across from you in the damp cellar of a forgotten monastery. His name is Tariq. His Christian robes are a costume. Beneath them beats the heart of a city your priests call decadent, a city of 1 million people, of libraries and lampposts. While you live in a world of mud and superstition, the only light is a single tallow candle. He doesn't understand the leverage point you've just handed him, but he understands it is his only hope. You have just given him the one stone that can shatter the bishop's wall. Now, you both must pray he knows how to throw it. With trembling fingers, you work the tiny latch. It opens with a soft, expensive click. You lean in, expecting the smell of dust, of age, of holiness. Instead, your nostrils are filled with a sweet, sickly chemical odor. It's the smell of cheap preservative resin, the kind used to stop meat from rotting too quickly. It's the smell of a lie. There, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, is the bone. It's too thick, too short, and at the end of it, a distinctive, rounded shape that you've seen 100 times on the butcher's block. The bishop is waiting for your answer. He mistakes your silence for awe, for gratitude. He cannot see the cold fire that has just ignited behind your eyes. He cannot know that you see him not as a holy man, but as the regional manager of a vast, spiritual protection racket. You've been looking for the heart of the beast, the center of the web. The medical lies, the historical forgeries, they were just symptoms. This economic engine fueled by fear is the disease itself. To fight it, you can't stay on the outside. They had a needle, a thread, and a terrifying kind of courage. They would take a single pustule from someone suffering the pox, a minuscule amount of the poison, and introduce it into the healthy. A controlled sickness, a small fire to prevent a conflagration. The church called it a pact with demons, a mortal sin to play God. But Brother Thomas, he wasn't a demonologist. He was a man who knew how to count. The scroll isn't a book of spells, it's a ledger of life and death. You trace the columns with a trembling finger. The surgeon's saw isn't meant to save you. It's designed to be the final word in an argument between your body and God's will. The first test of the forbidden book has found you, not in a library of whispered secrets, but in the filth of a military camp. It begins as a dull throb in your thigh, a memory of an arrow. Now, it is a living thing, a hot, swollen parasite of rotting flesh that promises to crawl up your leg and stop your heart. You can smell the sweet poison of it on your own breath. The sale of God's forgiveness becomes a system of debt so vast, it enslaves generations before they are even born. What they don't want you to know is that this system was never abandoned. It was perfected. The Codex's final warning makes the skin on your arms crawl. It speaks of a technologically advanced dark age, a world with access to infinite knowledge, but where invisible currents of data, curated narratives, and social pressure guide the flock away from the dangerous cliffs of truth. The sound is like fingernails on a coffin lid. You see the bishop in your mind, his face plump with wine and certainty, speaking of the new cathedral wing the tax will fund, a monument to his own glory, built on the broken backs of the men now marching on his gates. He calls them animals. It's the oldest trick in the world, one they'll still be using 700 years from now. You don't have to burn books when you can convince the world the authors are nothing more than thugs, terrorists, or heretics. Or become a weaver and help us keep the flame of knowledge alive in the dark. The choice hangs in the beeswax-scented air, heavier than any sword you have ever lifted. Go home, Elias, you say, your tone flat, betraying nothing. But do not go to the field tomorrow. Send your wife, and tell her to bring not a weapon, but the shroud of your infant daughter who died of the fever last winter. He stares at you, his face a canvas of confusion and terror. The request is insane. It's a death sentence. But for the first time, a flicker of something other than despair appears in his eyes. A wild, desperate question. The system isn't just built on a lie. Thomas's cynical face flashes in your memory. It's built on the arrogant assumption that no one would ever have the courage or the madness to look too closely. The groan of the crypt door's iron hinges echoes in the cavernous dark. Your single candle pushes back a pathetic circle of shadow, revealing stone walls slick with damp. The air is thick, cold, and dead. On a simple stone altar sits the new reliquary. Gleaming even in the faint light, your heart hammers against your ribs, a frantic drumbeat of sacrilege and fear. It's the same predatory blueprint that uses complex language to hide its teeth. The same web of service fees and late charges and impossible interest rates that traps the vulnerable in a cycle of debt they can never escape. The grand cathedrals, with their soaring spires and stained glass saints, weren't just built on faith. They were financed by manufactured spiritual debt. They were cemented with the tears of families who had to choose between a fee for their infant's baptism or buying grain for the winter. Each beautiful stone is a monument to 1,000 silent bankruptcies of the soul. Unfurling the scroll, the parchment crackles under your sweat-slicked fingers, a sound like dry leaves skittering over a tombstone. The monk's script is a frantic dance of Latin and local dialect, his quill having dug deep into the vellum, as if trying to carve truth directly into the skin of the world. He calls it variolation. What they don't want you to know, what 99% of people will never learn, is that for centuries, village healers and cunning women, the ones later called witches, had been fighting the red pox their own way. They didn't have holy water or saints' relics, but be warned, some truths about the past are harder to forget than others. The secret that 99% of people will live and die without ever grasping is that the very structure of power requires a dark age. It needs an enemy to manufacture fear. It needs ignorance to ensure obedience. It needs a story, one story, repeated until it becomes the only story, to manufacture consent. The abbess looks at you, her eyes ancient wells of knowledge. The fear of hell, she translates, her voice a rasp, becomes the fear of the stranger at your border. The burning of heretical texts becomes the silent algorithmic shadow that erases an idea. They are an army. The order from the bishop still feels like a hot coal in your gut. Crush them, Captain. Make an example that will echo for a century. Remind this rabble of God's divine order. You can still smell the incense and entitlement in his chambers, the cloying sweetness, a stark contrast to the stench of fear now rising from the men around you. The metallic taste of bile coats your tongue. You grip the cold, damp stone of the battlement, your gauntlet scraping a fine powder from the mortar. The abbess rolls the map slowly, the sound echoing the crumbling of your entire worldview. The bishop wants you to find a single thread of this network and destroy it for him. He offers you coin and his continued favor. She pushes the rolled map gently across the polished wood until it stops just before your hands. I am offering you the whole tapestry. I am offering you a choice. Be his blade and strike a blow for ignorance. Her eyes hold yours. Every structure, whether of granite or of law, has a keystone, a load-bearing point, a single hidden spot where the right pressure can bring the whole edifice down. The law is not a divine manuscript. It is a machine built by men, and any machine can be broken. You look at the coin, then back into Elias's pleading eyes. You don't take it. Instead, you lean forward, the leather of your gauntlets creaking. As you place your hands flat on the table, you lower your voice so the guards by the door cannot hear. It's the story that cements the bishop's authority and fills the church's coffers. The bone is just a prop in a play so vast, no one can see the edges of the stage. That night, you cannot sleep. The weight of the knowledge presses down on you, heavier than a cathedral roof. As the newly appointed architect's apprentice, you carry a ring of iron keys that grant you access to places others cannot go. One of them, cold and heavy, is for the crypt. A terrible, blasphemous idea takes root in your mind. But if the fear of hell wasn't enough, the temporal authorities, men loyal to the bishop, men you are being asked to command, would arrive to foreclose. They would take your land, your tools, your future. Your debt to God was a mortgage on your life, and the fear of hell was the ultimate collection agency. This isn't ancient history. It's the direct ancestor of the world you feel stirring in the future. The night air is a blade in your lungs, sharp with the smell of wet earth and coming frost. You've never run this hard in your life, not even as a child chasing rabbits through the fields. This is a different kind of chase, You are the rabbit, and the hounds of God are about to be unleashed. You stumble into the meager cover of a copse of birch trees, their white bark like skeletal fingers in the moonlight. You need to read it again. You need to understand the heresy you now carry. You are just a soldier, a pawn. But this book is heavier than any sword, and knowing this secret has just made you the most hunted man in Christendom. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1099. Let's begin. And live the life they never got to finish. The years have thinned the abbess's hair to silver lace. The silence in her scriptorium is heavy, filled only by the dry whisper of parchment as your finger traces the final, heavily coded passage. The ink is faded to the color of a ghost, but the meaning, now unlocked, burns with a terrible clarity. It is not a secret of the past. It is a blueprint for the future. The forbidden truth, the one they buried under 1,000 years of stone and prayer, was never about a single king's lust or a pope's greed. The official history will call it a riot. You will know it as the day the lies fell apart. 99% of people believe the chronicles etched by nervous monks, that on this day, a mindless mob of peasants, drunk on cheap ale and ignorance, threw themselves against the city walls. They believe the masses are beasts, capable only of spasmodic, violent rage. But from your position on the parapet, watching the 1,000 pinpricks of torchlight advance through the twilight fields, you know a truth so dangerous it could burn the whole world down. These are not beasts. He called it a statistical anomaly. She taps the map. It's not an anomaly. It is proof of us, of a decentralized trade so vast it props up their failing, greedy system. You realize with a sickening lurch what you are looking at. It's the medieval dark web, a system that thrives in the shadows, fueled by the same human need for freedom that will one day inspire encrypted messages and untraceable currencies. It is the inextinguishable fire of knowledge, passed from hand to hand in the dark. His entire worldly wealth, offered to you not for justice, but for a sliver of a chance at survival. You are the captain of the guard. Your duty is to oversee the legality of this proceeding, to stand by and watch a good man be slaughtered for the crime of being poor. But you are not just a soldier. You have studied the bishop's own legal codex, the very weapon he uses to control this valley. And late at night, in secret, you have learned the mason's wisdom, not just of stone, but of systems. He explains the brutal, brilliant economics of it all. A town with a powerful relic becomes a destination. A destination means pilgrims. Pilgrims mean a flood of coin for lodging, for food, for candles, for tithes. It's an ancient form of mass media, a psychological tool for directing the flow of people and wealth. Think of it like a modern king spreading a rumor of a dragon to keep peasants away from his private forest. The power isn't in the relic, it's in the story everyone agrees to believe. The institution that whispers, "Blessed are the poor," is the single largest, most ruthless landowner and financial power in the known world. And 99% of the people it rules over have no idea that the system is deliberately designed to keep them that way. Failure to pay these compounding spiritual debts wasn't just a sin. The church had its own courts, its own enforcers. First came the threat of excommunication, being cast out, your soul damned, your neighbors forbidden from speaking to you, your own family turned against you. 3 of us knew the truth. Brother Thomas and Annabel were burned as witches. I am next. The words are not written, they are scratched into the parchment, a frantic testament from a man who knew his ink would outlive his blood. And now you are the fourth. The scroll is a forbidden weight in your hands, its edges brittle and cold against your skin. You are running. Your heart is a wild bird, beating against the cage of your ribs, each frantic thump echoing the monastery bell that will soon toll for your discovery. The Church teaches that sickness is God's punishment, a holy whip to keep the flock obedient. This book whispers a more dangerous gospel. Sickness is a mechanical failure, a problem that can be understood and fixed by the hands of man. What they don't want you to know is that the Dark Ages weren't a period of lost knowledge, but of actively suppressed knowledge. You are holding the proof. That heretic's final breath echoes in your mind. And as you trace the impossibly detailed drawing of a human heart, you feel a shift in the world. The one truth the Codex was so desperately designed to protect. Your fingernails scrape against the rough-hewn table, the sound unnaturally loud in the suffocating silence. You have found the truth, buried in a tomb of forgotten words. But having proof and being able to use it are two very different things. And the soft, rhythmic scrape of a boot on the stone stairs outside tells you that you are no longer the only one who knows what's hidden in this room. Heretics moved to the safety of neutral cities, Jewish scholars fleeing persecution, disgraced academics whose only crime was curiosity. It is a network built not on gold, but on trust and mutual desperation. A coalition of the unwanted and the brilliant. What they don't want you to know, she continues, her voice dropping to a conspirator's whisper, is that this network keeps their world stable. A scholar in Oxford recently published a study on salt prices. He couldn't explain why. For the last 50 years, prices in regions with high heretical activity remained inexplicably stable, even during famine and war. The armor is different, but the principle is the same. There are two kinds of justice, one for the rich and one for everyone else. Elias's fingernails make a dry, scraping sound against the wood of your table, a sound like rats behind a wall. It's an ASMR trigger of pure desperation. "Captain," he whispers, his voice raw, "I have tilled that soil since I was a boy. It was my father's. It is all I have." He pushes a single, small, tarnished silver coin across the table. It is. You realize with a sickening lurch in your gut, everything. It's a multi-million ducat industry of lies, built on a supply chain of gallows-fresh criminals, desecrated paupers' graves, and the contents of butcher shop refuse bins. Centuries from now, scientists will carbon date the contents of a single German cathedral's reliquary collection. They will find that over 80% of the holy artifacts are fakes. Splinters of wood from common trees, the finger bones of pigs, the teeth of horses, all passed off as pieces of the divine. Thomas leans closer, his breath hot with cheap ale. "It's not about faith, boy. It's never been about faith. It's about control." His father is dying and needs last rites to save his soul from the eternal fires of hell, the most expensive fee of all. Suddenly, that simple 10% has metastasized. It's 20%, 25%. For some, records show it was more than a third of everything they produced, bled from them not by a sword, but by the terror of damnation. Your skin crawls. You look at the bishop's soft hands, hands that have never known a callus, and you understand. As your fingertips make contact with the spine, A sound from above slices through the silence, a heavy, rhythmic scraping. Boots on the stone floor of the chapel, directly overhead. They aren't walking, they are searching. The sound stops, silence returns, but it's a different kind now. It's the silence of a predator that has found the scent. They know you're here. This secret is no longer about the past. It's about your future, and whether you will live to see the dawn. You see a map of the human body's rivers, the circulatory system, something the priests swear is a divine mystery known only to God. You see illustrations of impossible surgeries, trepanation, the removal of cataracts from an eye. They are performed with specialized tools that recent archaeological finds in monastery basements prove existed. Kits that official histories claim were not invented for another 400 years. You can smell the brittle, aged vellum, a scent of ancient knowledge and profound danger. This is not a history lesson. This is an unveiling. You send another to the city slums with instructions on boiling water and digging latrines away from the wells. Small truths, seeds of a forgotten world. The fight is not over. It has just truly begun. You hold the codex, the source of it all, its leather cover warm beneath your hands. You used its secrets to reclaim a city. But as you look out over the rooftops at the dawn of a new age, a cold dread settles in your heart. You've won the battle, but what is the final, most dangerous secret of all? It's what every entrenched power does when it confronts a decentralized truth it cannot control. First, it tries to co-opt it. If that fails, it tries to destroy it. The proof in your hands is undeniable. It's evidence of the greatest crime ever committed, the premeditated murder of a future that could have been. But there is no court to bring this to. There is no king who would dare listen. The institution that wrote these decrees still controls what is real, what is true, what is holy. She looks up, her gaze pinning you to the wall. The real wealth, the real innovation, the very lifeblood of Europe flows through these channels. This is how the future survives the present. She explains that it's more than just untaxed wool and wine. It is the primary channel for the forbidden. Banned books from Cordoba, filled with Arabic medicine that could save thousands from the physician's saws. Scientific instruments that prove the earth is not the center of all things. People, had it been a soft-skinned noble lady, her flesh would have bubbled and peeled in an instant, a sure sign of God-given innocence. It is a system designed to punish the very evidence of a hard, honest life. The calluses of the poor condemn them. This is the dark ancestor of a future you can't imagine, where a man's guilt or innocence is decided not by truth, but by the quality of the silken-tongued lawyer he can afford. Later, when the celebrations have turned into a drunken, fervent mess in the tavern, he corners you in the alley behind the scriptorium. The air smells of piss and stale beer. "You saw the mark," he whispers, his voice a dry rasp of stone dust and cynicism. "The Ouroboros of Venice, the sign of the bone merchants. What they don't want you to know, what 99% of the souls in this town will live and die without ever suspecting, is that the trade in holy relics is one of the greatest and most profitable frauds in Christendom. The truth, buried in the account books of places like the Cluny Abbey and sealed from common eyes for centuries, is that the Church invented predatory lending. You see it in your mind's eye, a tapestry of economic terror woven with threads of faith. A farmer gives his tithe, a tenth of his grain, his best lamb, a tenth of his labor. But then his child needs to be baptized. That requires a sacramental fee. His daughter is to be wed. Another fee. The advancement of the last half-millennium has been a carefully managed, deliberately orchestrated decline. Control the past, control the present, control knowledge, control reality itself. Your quest for a simple medical text has led you to the heart of a conspiracy so vast it has reshaped civilization. Your fingers brush against a slim, unassuming volume bound in dark, cracked leather. The title is in Latin, De Republica, on the Republic, a treatise on a world without kings or popes, a world governed by citizens. This is the most dangerous idea of all. They buried this secret deeper than any king's tomb because a healthy, self-sufficient populace is impossible to control. It's the same reason a simple, effective cure today is often less profitable than a lifetime of complex treatments. That night, by the pathetic flicker of a tallow lamp, you pry the book open. The metallic taste of fear is on your tongue. The script is a cipher, a strange dance of Latin and symbols, but the diagrams steal the air from your chest. You don't take his throne. You don't wear his robes. You walk out of that palace and into a new world of your own making. You are not a conqueror. You are the center of a web, a protector of secrets now ready to be shared. You have become the emperor of Europe's hidden world. The work begins at once, slow and dangerous. You release grain from the bishop's hoarded stores. You send an agent to a farming village with a diagram, a simple drawing of a 3-field crop rotation system that will double their yield in 2 years. 99% of people never learn about the heretical enlightenment, that terrifying, brilliant flood of knowledge that poured out of the Islamic world, carrying the rediscovered wisdom of Aristotle, the medical genius of Avicenna, the rational philosophy of Averroes. It was a surge of light that threatened to wake a sleeping continent, and the establishment panicked. The subsequent crusades, the inquisitions, the witch hunts, they weren't a defense of faith. They were a brutal, reactionary crackdown, a firewall of fire and steel erected to contain a virus they called progress. You see the pattern with a sickening, modern clarity. It is not a map of any world you recognize. There are no kingdoms marked here, no bold lines for France or the Holy Roman Empire. Instead, it is a spiderweb of faint trails, dotted symbols, and coded names that crisscross the continent like a living nervous system. This, she says, her finger tracing a path from a hidden port in Genoa to a monastery in the northern forests of Germania, is the silent thoroughfare. What 99% of people, including your bishop, will never know is that the official economy is a lie, a pageant for kings and clerics. She had to carry a bar of red-hot iron 10 paces. 99% of people have never learned the disgusting secret of this test. The priest declared that if God saw her as innocent, her hands would not blister. But her hands were the calloused, leather-tough hands of a washerwoman, thickened by a lifetime of lie and labor. The hot iron barely marked her. "Guilt," the priest shrieked. "A witch's hands, which feel no holy fire." You saw the truth. From your place near the half-finished bell tower, you watch the tide of manufactured faith wash over them. But next to you, the master mason, Thomas, does not kneel. He doesn't even look up. He simply spits a glob of phlegm into the thick dust at his feet, and with the toe of his worn boot, he draws a quick, angry symbol, a serpent eating its own tail. with a cross struck through the center. You've never seen it before. He sees you looking, and his gaze is as hard and unforgiving as the granite he shapes. The forbidden medical codex taught you that their cures were a lie. The monastery's hidden histories taught you that their divine timelines were a lie. Now, sitting in the suffocating scent of beeswax and old power, you finally see the most profound lie of all, the one hidden not in a sealed vault, but in every single offering plate, in every village, across 1,000 miles of Christendom. What they don't want you to know is that the tithe was never just 10%. That's the story for children and the simple. It was a lie. This isn't just a collection of books, it's evidence of a crime. This is the medieval equivalent of a physician hiding the cure for the plague to sell more prayers for the sick. They didn't lose this knowledge. They confiscated it. They buried it. They created a monopoly on salvation. But to do so, they first had to create a monopoly on ignorance. They call this the Dark Ages to hide a terrifying truth. They were the ones who turned out the lights. He's a heretic from a village the church wanted wiped from memory, and his eyes burn with a light that has no place among the dead. With his last rattling breath, he shoves something into your hand. It's a small codex, bound in leather, but it feels heavier than stone. Its cover is branded with a symbol that makes your blood run cold, a serpent devouring its own tail, coiled around a physician's staff. He rasps a single phrase, a ghost of a whisper against your ear. Sanitas est potestas. Health is power. They will burn this palace to the ground with you in it. You slide a second document across the desk, a signed confession. Or you can retire, a quiet monastery by the sea. You will devote your life to prayer and penance. You will be forgotten, but you will be alive. His hand trembles as he reaches for the quill. The only sound in the room is the scratching of the nib, and then a final, quiet clatter as his heavy gold signet ring slips from his finger and rolls across the stone floor. The study of the stars, it declares, is a pact with fallen angels, the practice of surgery, an obscene mockery of God's will. The very act of asking why the world is as it is, without first consulting Scripture, is equated in blood-red ink with the worship of Lucifer. This wasn't a series of disconnected acts of pious ignorance. You see it now. It was a coordinated war. You suddenly understand the terror that seized them in the 12th century. You let the silence hang, a testament to your discipline. Your heart hammers a frantic rhythm against your ribs, a drumbeat of pure metallic fear. She allows a faint smile to touch her lips, a crack in a stone facade. He is a fool. He sees a trickle of silver escaping his grasp. He is blind to the river. From a heavy chest bound in iron, she removes a roll of treated vellum. When she spreads it across the table, it makes a dry, whispering crackle, like autumn leaves skittering across gravestones. This isn't a trial. It's an execution disguised as piety. What they don't want you to know is that this system, this holy appeal to the Almighty, is the most ingenious form of oppression ever devised. It allows the powerful to legally murder the weak and call it a miracle. A nobleman can hire a champion, a hardened killer to fight in his stead. Elias can barely afford to feed his children. The game is rigged. You remember the woman from last spring, accused of stealing bread? The ordeal was by fire. The bishop's voice rings out across the square, a bronze bell of absolute authority. He holds the reliquary high, a jewel box of gilded silver and crystal, and the sun catches it, throwing a sliver of blinding light across the ecstatic faces of the crowd. Inside, he proclaims, is a miracle made bone, a knuckle of John the Baptist himself. A wave of awed gasps ripples through the town. People fall to their knees. This is it. This is the divine touch that will ward off plague, guarantee a harvest, save their wretched souls. The bishop's ring is a stone of frozen blood set in gold. It glints in the candlelight as he pushes the contract across the polished oak table, the sound a soft, final scrape against the wood. "Captain of my guard," he says, his voice like honey and gravel. A title, a home within these walls, a wage that could feed your family for 3 generations. You stare at the black ink on the vellum, the offer of a golden chain, and see only the shackle. You've seen this magic trick before. You run your finger over a diagram of a hypocaust, a Roman central heating system that channeled hot air under the floors of villas. A shiver racks your body, a deep, bone-aching chill from the cellar's damp, and the irony is so profound it feels like a physical blow. You can see your own breath misting in the lamplight. For 500 years, people have shivered. For 500 years, they have frozen in the winter, huddled around pathetic fires. Their children dying of lung sickness in drafty hovels. They called it God's will, a penance for their sins. The greatest lie they ever told you is not written in any history book. It's smeared in the mud of this forgotten battlefield, and you're about to taste it on the air. You believe medieval peasants were ignorant, dirty, stupid. That is the lie, engineered to hide a truth so terrifying it could unravel power itself. You are not you. You are Etienne, a low-born soldier in 11th century Francia, and your world is a symphony of mud, blood, and the groans of the dying. The coppery tang of death is a fog in your lungs. But one man isn't groaning.